our country, and that we may be reminded of our great responsibility that we have to stand up for our faith. We ask this in your name, you're holy and blessed, now and ever to ages of ages. Amen. Please be seated. So by way of a very brief background and introduction, I'd like to say that on behalf of the Christian Rights and Freedom Ministry Steering Committee, which is perhaps the newest ministry of our church, we would like to welcome you all. And certainly the co-chairs of that committee, Mr. Harry Demas, Mr. Richard Pappas, and Dr. Harry Demopoulos. We would like to welcome you, John. And indeed, we are so grateful to have John with us because he came quite a long distance all the way from Houston, Texas to be with us, and even traveling at his own expense and taking time off from his work and his clientele and his very busy legal practice and his family. And he is a very devoted father. We certainly also want to thank Dr. Chris Papadopoulos and Richard Pappas, who helped to organize the luncheon that we had this afternoon, so John could be welcome here in our community. It's true that we've all been glued to our TVs in the last few weeks, watching with horror all the terrible developments in the Middle East and in Europe. We know about the indiscriminate killings in Paris and in Brussels, and the brazen disregard for basic human rights and decency that seems to have gone out the window as we struggle to understand the source of this scourge and just what we might do about it. The fact is, much of what these killers learned, they learned in their schools. The hatred was imbued in their soul at a very young age. That is obvious to most Europeans now, and perhaps it's a bit late. It's becoming certainly true and well known to us here in America. But what do we know about what is going on in the USA? Do we know what our children are being taught? What is going on in some of our schools here in America? This is what John is here to talk to us about. Certainly as an archon and a very respected attorney, John comes to us with outstanding credentials. He is a powerhouse lawyer, well recognized in the great state of Texas and nationally. He is a partner in the law firm of AZA. The Z stands for Zavitsanos. His cases have repeatedly been featured in the Wall Street Journal, in the Times, the New York Times, the National Law Journal, the American Lawyer, the Texas Lawyer, and many other national publications. But John is also a great servant to our faith. He is an archon of the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle. He serves on a 5-member committee of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, which is focused on the issue of human rights and litigating those matters in the European courts. He has led a very successful Exarch's fundraising appeal as well. He has served as the president of his parish council for 3 terms. He has a grassroots understanding of what happens in our own parishes. And his home parish is the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church, or the Cathedral as it is known in Houston, Texas. He was the president of the school, AOS, the Annunciation Orthodox School, as it is known, serving as the president of that board, which is a very successful Greek Orthodox charter school in Houston. And each year, there are more than 800 students who register in that school, which started as a school within the church, but has now grown to the point that it is perhaps the most desirable school to attend for children through the 8th grade in all of Houston. It is known as the School of Hearts and Minds in Houston. We certainly could not be happier to invite John to come and speak to us, and that he's here, that he's taken the time. Seems almost unbelievable that you would come here to Naples and be with us. But we're very grateful. It's true that this is just one of many different events that will be unfolding throughout the season from January through April. And we do hope that people who are here gathered will take the time to be familiar with the rest of the program that is unfolding. And please to support it with all our strength in our hearts. Finally, the last thing that really made me happy to learn today, and was one of the first things that we learned as we sat down to lunch today, is to come to understand that John is a fellow of Katherine, and that he spends a month in Greece each summer, and the place he stays is within sight of my dad's village. And so we do welcome you from the bottom of our hearts, with open arms and with love. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Father. Father, members of the Parish Council, ladies of the Philotochos, and parishioners of this very vibrant, wonderful parish, thank you very much for having me. I had the privilege today of having lunch with some of the members of the Parish Council, some of the leaders in your community, and y'all have been just very, very gracious. And you have a very, very progressive thinking priest. You're very lucky. You have some incredible programs here, and this is, having programs like this is really quite visionary, and I encourage you to continue this. So I'm here tonight to talk about the Turkish influence in the United States, and I'm going to break that down into two parts. I'm going to talk about first. I'm going to try to be brief on the front end. Briefly talk about what the government itself does in terms of lobbying efforts, and I'm using lobbying very broadly. And then second, and that would be from the top down, and then second, what the Turks are doing from the bottom up in terms of in our schools, and it's really, it's absolutely shocking. You want to say that it's happening under our noses, but it's really not. I mean, it's happening right in front of our faces. And it is growing like every year, just exponentially, gets bigger and bigger. And what I want to do is I want to start out, maybe the best way to start this is by playing this piece that appeared on 60 Minutes, I think it was a couple of years ago, a few years ago, on an Islamic imam known as Gulen. This is a guy who Time Magazine included him on their list of the 100 most influential people in the world. This is a guy that has received all kinds of awards from Congress, from many state legislators. I'll tell you about one in particular a little bit later. But this is a guy who has spearheaded a movement in the United States to start these charter schools here in the United States. And a charter school is different than a private school. You have public schools. Public schools are very highly regulated. All the employees are state employees. It is 100% public, and it is nonprofit. Private schools are typically parochial schools, completely private. There are some requirements that you have to meet in terms of getting accredited, things of that sort. But the funding is almost always exclusively private. That's why they charge tuition. Charter schools are a hybrid between the two. In a charter school, the state pays for the charter school, pays to build it, pays to operate it, pays to run it, but it is privately owned. It is managed privately. Okay? And this man that you're about to see has sprinkled charter schools all through the United States. And so what I'd like to do is, let's start the piece. When we get done with this piece, you're probably going to want to stand up and cheer him until you get done listening to the rest of the presentation. All right, so let's play this first. It's about 13 minutes, and
over the past decade, scores of charter schools have popped up all over the U.S., all sharing some common features. Most of them are high-achieving academically. They stress math and science. And one more thing, they're founded and largely run by immigrants from Turkey, who are carrying out the teachings of a Turkish Islamic cleric, Fethullah Gulen. He's the spiritual leader of a growing and increasingly influential force in the Muslim world known as the Gulen movement, with millions upon millions of disciples who compare him to Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Gulen promotes tolerance, interfaith dialogue, and above all, he promotes education. And yet he's a mystery man. He's never seen or heard in public. And the more power he gains, the more questions are raised about his motives and the schools.
The story will continue in a moment.
Hi, everyone. Hi. This is the Harmony School in Houston, part of a rapidly expanding chain of 36 charter schools in Texas. They serve mostly underprivileged students, and they all emphasize math and science.
Inside, there's an elastic collision between the gas particles.
What this is a static electricity generator.
Classwork stresses hands-on experiments and competitiveness. Students made this hovercraft out of leaf blowers for a science contest.
Feels great.
Being a charter chain means they're public schools, costing taxpayers nearly $150 million a year. So you don't even have a driver's license yet.
But I have a robotics license.
Julie Norton is an administrator with the Harmony chain of schools.
So we have about 20,000 students.
Is there a waiting list?
Yes, we have a waiting list. We have approximately 30,000 students on our waiting list. We have more students on the waiting list than we actually have enrolled in the school.
The education here gets high marks as students get state-of-the-art technology and extensive one-on-one tutoring. You get excited to come to school?
Yeah. I wake up like, woo!
The enthusiasm is hard to miss, as is the fact that many of the teachers are Turkish, some just recently arrived, and hard to understand. When did you get here, to the United States?
Yeah, I got a DV lottery, and because of the DV lottery, I came here.
There are a total of about 130 charter schools like Harmony in 26 states. Together, they form the largest collection of charter schools in the country. Here's what's curious. They're founded and run by immigrant businessmen and academics from Turkey. Why are they building public schools here? Well, the answer seems to lie with this mystery man, the Turkish Imam Fethullah Gulen, who tells his followers that to be devout Muslims, they shouldn't build mosques, they should build schools, and not to teach religion, but science. In sermons on the web, he actually says, studying physics, mathematics, and chemistry is worshiping God. So Gulen's followers have gone out and built over 1,000 schools around the globe, from Turkey to Togo, from Taiwan to Texas.
His message is that if you want to solve any social problem for the longer term, the solution has to go through education.
Businessman Alp Aslandawan chairs a foundation in Houston that advances Gulen's teachings. It's so counterintuitive that people from Turkey would come here to get involved here in education.
People do go to other countries, including Africa. United States, especially in math and science, is not really good, and many parents complain about that. So there is a need for skilled teachers in the United States in that fields.
We went to Turkey to learn more and found Gulen schools are everywhere and considered the best. They're often multi-million-dollar high-tech facilities where girls are equal to boys and English is taught starting in first grade. Gulen didn't only influence education. Starting in the late 60s as a young imam, he urged crowds of middle-class Turks to learn from the West and embrace its values, including an unexpected one, making money. In this internet sermon, he even told his followers, if you don't seek ways to be wealthy, that is a sin in the eyes of God. So his disciples in Turkey became successful businessmen and built a multi-billion-dollar Gulen empire that beyond the schools includes TV stations, a major bank, Turkey's largest trade association, and biggest newspaper.
They love capitalism. It really is very much a business network as much as a religion in many ways.
Andrew Finkel, who's been a freelance reporter in Turkey for 25 years, says Gulen tells his followers to reach out to people of other faiths.
Tolerance is a very key part of their message. And it's not about the use of force.
It's as far away from Osama bin Laden as you can get?
Very,
within the religion?
Very, very different, yes.
So I guess one of the big questions is what kind of a Islamic leader is Gulen?
He leads by his own charismatic personality.
Would you call it a personality cult?
Yes.
To his followers, Gulen's like a living prophet, and he used his
Pennsylvania retreat. So does Mr. Gulen live in this building?
Yes, in this building.
To our surprise, Bekir Aksoy, who heads the retreat, invited us in, even though Gulen had turned us down for an interview. So this is the prayer room. Oh, is that Mr. Gulen's seat, his chair?
Right, whenever he comes out of his room, he sits there and speaks from there.
And that's where he lives, behind that door?
Yeah, is the door behind which Mr. Gulen lives. And this is private room.
Gulen lives there alone. He's never married. The pile of medicine bottles are a reminder that at 70 plus, he's diabetic with heart and kidney problems. Will he come out? Will we get to see him?
For the last 5-6 months, he is very, very ill already. When he is ill, he does not accept visitors.
When Gulen came to the U.S. in 1999, it was for medical treatment. But then this video surfaced, in which he seemed to order his flock to surreptitiously take over key government positions in Turkey in a stealth Islamic coup. Accused of treason by the government at the time, Gulen decided to stay in the Poconos, even after he was cleared in 2008 in absentia. Why is he still in America?
Well, I think if he would have come back, then there would be such a brouhaha, and I think he would be afraid of being seen as being too powerful.
Too powerful because it seems that his followers have taken over key positions in the Turkish government and the police.
If he says jump, people jump. There's no doubt about that.
You know, we have confronted real fear about this movement, particularly when we try to get critics to give us an interview. What are they afraid of?
There's a fear of reprisal. I mean, it is the case that 2 or 3 people who've written books highly critical of the Gulen movement are now in jail.
Seeming to have such power, this Wizard of Oz recluse invites conspiracy theories that he's running Turkey from the Poconos and is bent on global Muslim domination. His movement does lack transparency. Its funding, hierarchy, and ambitions remain hidden, leading our State Department to wonder, in cables between Ankara and Washington, if Gulen has an insidious political agenda. And now some of the suspicion revolves around the U.S. schools. Do they serve a function other than educating our kids? One accusation involves immigration fraud, that the schools are providing work visas for hundreds of Gulen followers from Turkey. And the whole idea is just to get Turks to come into the United States, and this is an easy avenue for them.
Which is categorically not true.
David Dunn of the Texas Charter Schools Association says that because of a deficit of qualified Americans, the schools bring in math and science teachers from Turkey, as this list of visa applications indicates. Problem is, we've seen that some of these visas for Turkish teachers to come here are for them to teach English. How does that make any sense?
I'm not aware of that. I can't comment on that. I don't know. I've not looked intimately at the visas that they bring in.
We have English teachers in this country.
English teachers are typically not part of the critical or the deficit.
Our tax dollars are paying for them to come over here and take our jobs.
Mary Addy was fired as a teacher from a school in Cleveland, Ohio, part of a Gulen-inspired chain of 27 charter schools in the Midwest.
They want to give you the impression that they're just hard-working guys over here to try to educate our kids because American teachers are just too stupid.
As far as you know, Why is an Islamic imam, which Gulen is, interested in setting up schools in the United States?
Because it's a great money-making operation.
Gulen's followers can make money through contracts to build and maintain the schools. But Addie has gone to law enforcement with charges that the schools also make money by bringing in foreign teachers in order to take a cut of their salaries. She says she learned this after marrying a Turkish teacher.
And that's what he told me. At every pay period, he would have to cash his check and he had to give 40% of his check back because
40% of his
cash.
salary?
Yes.
And you've turned documents over to various federal agencies that you say proves this on paper.
Yes.
The schools dismiss Addie's claims, calling her a disgruntled employee. But federal authorities told us they take her seriously and are looking into allegations of immigration fraud and misuse of taxpayer money in various states, and whether it's somehow being funneled to the Gulen movement. Then there's the internet, where there are incendiary blogs accusing the schools of secretly promoting an Islamic agenda. You know, there are various blogs that have accused these schools of being backdoor madrasas.
Yes.
So do you think there's a little bit of Islamophobia involved?
I think there's clearly some anti-Islam bias involved in these blogs.
Actually, we looked into this, and Islam is not taught at all. That would be illegal, since these are public schools that go out of their way to distance themselves from any religious affiliation, even denying a connection to the Gulen movement.
I think what matters is the results in the classrooms. Are kids learning math, science, reading, writing at a superior level? And clearly in these schools that's happening.
It is happening. Newsweek voted 2 Harmony schools among America's top 10. More of these schools open every year across the country, and waiting lists just keep getting longer. Gulenists tell us the schools are about reading, writing, and arithmetic, not religion. And Fakir Aksoy in the Poconos says the man behind the door has no hidden agenda. Fethullah Gulen hasn't even visited any of the schools.
He does not want to see the fruits of his work. He just speaks and encourages the people to be good human beings.
That's interesting, because there are schools in Pennsylvania. We're not that far.
He has not seen any of them, believe me. He does not leave that room.
And Bakir Aksoy in the Poconos says the man behind the door has no hidden agenda. Fethullah Gulen hasn't even visited any of the schools.
He does not want to see the fruits of his work. He just speaks and encourages the people to be good human beings.
That's interesting, because there are schools in Pennsylvania. I mean, not that far.
He has not seen any of them, believe me. He does not leave that room.
So what's the deal with this guy? He has these schools, in the United States, we are very unique because we are the only country in the world that has these charter schools, right? Where you can have public taxpayer dollars being run privately, right? In other parts of the world, these Gulen schools are all private. So how did they start? Well, they started, for those of you that are from Asia Minor, you know that we were there before they were, right? The Turks all came from Central Asia. And there's a difference between being Turkic and being Turkish. Turkic covers a number of countries in Central Asia, like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, lots and lots of the former Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, this Gulen guy, who became an imam when he was 14 years old, right? And his father was an imam, and he's from the eastern part of Turkey where all the fundamentalists are. He decides that when the Soviet Union fell, which was an atheist, there was no official religion, there was a ripe opportunity. And so the Gulen schools in all of Central Asia were Muslim schools. I mean, they advanced a Muslim agenda, not quietly, not indirectly, but directly. And they were there to train young men, and this stuff about that boys and girls are equal is utter nonsense. I'll get to that in a second. But they were there to train young men to become imams and to spread Islam in Central Asia, right? And what happened? As these countries, which initially had no money and no governance or whatever, as they started figuring this out, they started closing these Gulen schools. And so some of the countries in Central Asia have abolished them, including Russia, among others. And in 1999, when he allegedly came here because of medical reasons, and his medical reasons were that he had diabetes. I mean, come on. I mean, how many people in this room have diabetes? Right? That he came over here because he had diabetes, and he came here for medical treatment. The reality was, this is before Erdogan's government. Erdogan is the current prime minister. And as we know, Turkey draws a sharp distinction between being nationalist and being Islamic. Those are after Ataturk, those are different. Okay, you have people that are Islamic in Turkey, and you have people that are nationalists. When the nationalists were in power, they indicted him for trying to create an Islamic state in Turkey. Now this is before Erdogan. Now he's the one who propped up Erdogan, and sure enough, they have a trial in absentia 8 years later, and he's cleared of all charges because Erdogan happens to have an Islamic agenda. Okay? Now he's at war with Erdogan, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. So he moves to the United States, and he's in a compound, and it is a compound because there are 100 Turkish soldiers that guard the compound with rifles at all times. Okay? Now, this is a man of peace, right? And there are 100 guys out there with machine guns that guard this compound at all times, and he does not give interviews. And what he did was, in fact, I got the Turkish word. They used to have a policy of. They used to have a policy of. Let me get the correct word here in just a second. It literally translates into proselytizing. And this was the agenda that they had in Central Asia. And he decided after he came here to the United States, after he figured out this charter school movement, that he could basically get local school boards to basically fund his agenda, and you cannot teach Islam in these schools, we're going to do things secretly. And the reason he was indicted in Turkey is for making this comment, okay? And this is, you can actually find this on the internet. And he claims it's taken out of context, but this is literally what he said. He says, one second. The existing system is still in power. Our friends who have positions in legislative bodies should learn its details and be vigilant all the time, so that they can transform it and be more fruitful on behalf of Islam in order to carry out our restoration. They should wait and have patience until conditions become more favorable. That was a secretly recorded speech that he gave to his followers that appeared on Turkish television. You must move in the arteries of the system without anyone noticing your existence until you reach the power centers. You must wait for the time when you are complete and conditions are right, until we can shoulder the entire world and carry it. Right? And it was those comments that got him in trouble with the nationalists years ago. So what did he do? He just...
Those comments are in Turkey, not here.
Those comments were in Turkey. Yes, and those are... it is unassailable that he made those comments. What he says is they were taken out of context. Now, what do we think when we hear someone say it was taken out of context? Right? It means you caught me. Right? And when he came here for medical reasons, he applied for a green card. And the State Department turned him down. And the reason they turned him down is because they had questions regarding his agenda. Right? And so what does he do? He starts building slowly, a power base of the most powerful people in the United States. He starts putting them, they start working for him. And so in 2007, he gets a green card. Now along the way, in 2000, he opens up the very first charter school in Texas. And this was a school that operated out of the basement of a church. Okay? Now remember, a charter school is funded by the state agency. It's funded by the state, by taxpayer dollars. And the reason that school boards like charter schools is because a charter school can operate at a lower cost than a public school. So I think, for example, in Houston Independent School District, we spend on average, I think it's like $11,500 per child a year. That's what it costs to operate the school system, if you divide the number of kids by the budget. A charter school can do it for $8,500. So we're talking about pretty significant cost savings. In addition to that, the people who start the charter school actually get the state agency, or the school board, to pay for the construction of the charter school. Right? And so what happens? These are no bid contracts, which means it's not competitive bidding. I mean, you can, if you are approved, they give you the money. As long as you don't go over budget, you're okay. Well, all of these contracts, and I mean almost all of them, go to Turkish companies. Gulen followers. Okay? And what happens is they end up building school at a cost of tens of millions of dollars sometimes, and they end up giving part of it back to the Gulen network. Now, if you add up, I mean, it's staggering how much we are spending on these schools. And there's now, so when this report was done, I think she said there were 135 or 136. We now have over 150. You have 10 of these in Florida. Okay? So what's the problem, right? I mean, they can't teach Islam in the schools, so why be concerned about it? Well, here's why. One of the things that you will see if you poke around on the internet, in fact, if you poke around on the official websites of these schools, and I can give you some of them at the end of this, they talk about these competitions, these after-school competitions. What these are they are students in these schools who participate in what they call the Turkish Olympics. Right? They learn, the schools offer two languages, Spanish and Turkish. That's it. And if you participate in the Turkish Olympics and you finish in the top 5 or 10, you get an all-expense-paid trip to Turkey, you and your family. Now they target inner-city kids, right? These are kids who probably have never been to Miami, let alone to Turkey. So the idea of having your whole family go over there and get hosted by a family with kids in a Gulen school in Turkey is pretty appealing. And it is all over the internet. I mean, you're seeing Hispanic kids, black kids, white kids singing Turkish songs, reciting Turkish poetry, in stadiums that hold 20,000, 30,000 people in Turkey. Right? Now, let's start adding up the numbers. You have, their goal is to have, and again, I'm getting this from some of their literature, their goal is to have 600 charter schools in the United States within the next 10 years.
Is every charter school, has he built all the charter schools?
No. So they are now the largest collection of charter schools, right? But there are many charter schools that have nothing to do with the Gulen movement. In fact, we have a fellow in Houston who's a Greek guy who runs 5 charter schools in the greater Houston area, and I mean he thinks Gulen is the devil. I mean it is just, they are, people in education are absolutely terrified of this guy. Okay, now where is the fear here? Well, until recently, these schools and what they do is they bring over, and you saw this in terms of the visas, where they bring over Turkish teachers to teach English. Okay, we have people like this man that you saw in the video who can barely speak a lick of English, teaching English in these schools. And the reason they are doing this, they get, if you add up the number of visas, work visas, that are given to Gulen-related schools, they are more than 3 times as much than the work visas for Hewlett-Packard, Apple Computer, IBM. These are technology companies, right, where you have all kinds of engineers in India. And there's 3 times as many going to the Gulen schools. And so it really, I believe it really is true that they are coming here to basically bolster up the ranks and get these people integrated into the government. Let me give you one, let me kind of take it aside here for a second and give you one personal experience that I had with this. So one of the things that we did with the Archons was we went to state legislatures across the country to get them to pass a resolution, a non-binding resolution, in support of religious freedom and the ecumenical patriarchy, the leader of our church. Right? And so there were a handful of us in Texas that made, the most powerful person in Texas is the lieutenant governor, not the governor, because the lieutenant governor controls the agenda for the House. And they get to decide whether you get on you get your bill up or not. And our legislature meets every other year. So we made an appointment with the lieutenant governor, David Dewhurst. And we sat across from him and we explained to him who the ecumenical patriarch was. We showed him the resolution. And it was all this really benevolent, kind language that 30 other states had passed. And he looked us right in the eye and he says, "You have my word. I'm going to support this. This is wonderful. He's a wonderful human being. I know all about him. He's a very kind man. I'm a strong supporter of Christian values, and we are going to back this up." Okay? Within 30 days of that meeting, we find out that 40% of our state legislatures have been offered all expense-paid trips to Turkey for them and their spouse for 10 days. The staffers of our state legislatures, which are the people that do all the work, are given these very lavish parties. And the person who was going to sponsor our bill, the state representative who was going to sponsor our bill, withdraws it, and they pass a bill honoring Fethullah Gulen. Okay? And David Dewhurst is on the steps. Now, he lost from governor, by the way. He's on the steps of the Capitol, okay, with Gulenists, talking about what a visionary this guy is and what a wonderful man. Okay, we then did some research and found out he received an incredible. He was running for governor, and he lost, but he received an incredible amount of money from all of these foundations with all these benevolent names that are all Turkish. Okay, so of course Greeks are a little more determined than the Turks. So we did not take it lightly. So we contacted all the parishes in Texas, let them know what was going on. And we actually wrote the letter for them. We gave them 3 different versions of the letter to have them write to their state representative. And they received more letters in 45 days, I think, than anything. I think we got like 7,000 letters in. And so we ended up getting the resolution passed the next time around. But this is a very, very insidious force that is kind of working against not just the Orthodox Church, but against Christianity in general. Now, let me get back to the charter schools in just a second, because some of the numbers are absolutely staggering. And let me talk now, I'm going to switch gears and talk about this organization called the Turkish Coalition of America. This is something that is directly funded by the Turkish government. And the one thing that the Turks do is there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit organizations that they set up with names like the Raindrop Foundation or the Harmony Foundation or the Sapphire Foundation. I mean, no indication that they are affiliated with a foreign country. And part of the reason that they set these up is because when members of Congress are being offered these lavish trips to Turkey, somebody got the idea that, hey, there's something wrong with this. And so they passed this legislation saying it is illegal for a foreign state to pay the expenses of an elected representative of the United States to go to a foreign country. I mean, that's a good law. It makes a lot of sense, right? They're supposed to be watching our interests, not some other foreign country. Well, this new legislation comes in, it says, exception, you can accept money from a nonprofit foundation. And guess what? That's where all the money starts coming in from, right? So this Turkish Coalition of America, let me just show you their website. Now this is, the reason I'm going to show you this is because part of what you're about to see is what is being taught in some of these Gulen schools, okay? Now here it is. So there's our capital, right? Looks very nice. And this is an organization that stays in very close contact with members of the House. And they have a majority of the House of Representatives are members of this Turkey caucus. The chairman of the the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which is a very powerful committee in Congress, is always a member of this. And through these foundations, they raise lots and lots of money. So here is, for example, this is right after the election, and you'll see that they talk about, I don't know if you can't see this, I know, but they talk about which state representative was elected, who was not elected. They're thanking congratulations to members who won re-election and officially took their place in the 114th Congress. And here's my favorite part. All of these foundations and Turkish organizations, they all employ white people as their heads so that nothing looks odd. You saw in the 60 Minutes piece, right? I mean, look at this. They got the president of the Turkish coalition is a guy named Lincoln McCurdy. And it sounds like something out of Leave It to Beaver, right? And they do this so that they disarm you, because most people don't react well to people with accents. So this Lincoln McCurdy was a very senior guy in the State Department. Very senior, lots of connections in Washington. So what do? Well, what is their purpose about us? So there's Lincoln McCurdy, and there's a page. Oh, here we go. What is the purpose of this organization? It is to, among other things, protect the character and ensure a realistic portrayal of Turkey and Turkish Americans in the media and the arts. Right? And so one of the things that they have here in doing this, and identify and recognize the achievements of Turkish Americans in academia, it all sounds very benevolent. So let's go to issues. Okay? And this includes more than a third of the U.S. House of Representatives. It includes significant amounts of private businesses, including companies like Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is based in Dallas. They were forcefully against the Ecumenical Patriarch Resolution. We found out they lobbied very hard against this. Why? Because Turkey buys a lot of jets from Lockheed Martin for their military. This is an American company, right? So what are the issues? Well, here are some of the issues. So let's pull up Turkish history. Let's pull up the Greek War of Independence and its toll on the Turks. Okay? I don't know if you can read this, but some of this is funny if we were in a different setting. Here, let me go to the bottom. Okay. The genocidal orgy in the Peloponnese ended only when there were no more Turks to kill. This so-called Greek War of Independence was hardly a war at all, but mostly a series of opportunistic massacres against defenseless civilians, women, and children who were slaughtered because of their ethnicity and religion. You know that game the little kids play, I know you are, but what am I? That sounds like what we said, right? So listen to this. After the massacre of the Peloponnese, similar skirmishes were started by the Greeks in Crete, Cyprus, Samos, Thessaly, Macedonia, and Epirus. Now, the ancient Greeks no longer exist. The place of Solon, Socrates, and Demosthenes have been taken by blind ignorance. The logical laws of Athens have been replaced by barbarism. Earlier up here, they blame the church as being supportive of genocide. Let me find it. Yeah, there you go. The patriotic cry of the revolution proclaimed by the Greek Archbishop Zavistanos, who, by the way, the Turks hung, right? They hung him from the patriarchal gates after the War of Independence started.
What's TCA?
Okay, so this website is pretty incredible. It's TCA. Yeah, just type in Turkish Coalition of America, you'll find it. And look, I could spend hours talking about what's on this website, but you ought to see what they say about the Armenians. You ought to see what they say about the Kurds. Okay, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in here about us, about the Greeks, and what happened. And these are the people in connection with Gulen who are coming over here to teach our kids, tens of thousands of our kids in these charter schools, among other things, history. Okay? Now the reality is, if you say it enough, if you say it over and over and over, the lie becomes the truth, and the truth becomes the lie. Right? I mean, it's absolutely baffling to me that the first genocide of the 20th century, the genocide that inspired Hitler to do what he did to the Jews and the Gypsies, which was the Armenian genocide, failed like a lead balloon in Congress. And why is that? Because many of them are members of this Turkish coalition, and they receive, and you have people like Dick Gephardt, who is I don't know if you remember him, but he ran for president. This was when he was a senator, and this was one of the really good guys in the Senate, and he was a forceful champion of the Armenian genocide resolution. I mean, this guy was as good as a guy. Okay, and whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I mean, he was a true human rights advocate, and he now works for the Turks. Okay, he is one of the lead lobbyists for Turkey, and he led the campaign when it came up again. He led the campaign against the Armenian genocide. All right. So let me go back now to the Gulen schools. So by the way, TCA has taken 160 members of Congress to Turkey and their families. Right? All expenses paid. And when they fly business class on Turkish Air, and you read the Turkish Air magazine, like this page right here, the title of this is Istanbul, not Constantinople. And there's a picture of Hagia Sophia, which is in the process of maybe becoming a mosque again. And it says, the architecture of the Ottoman Empire. Okay? I mean, this was I pulled out the page out of the magazine because we flew over there, and this is what everybody reads. Okay? So, all right. Oh, by the way, PCA, there's another thing that they do. If you are black or Hispanic, doesn't matter what your grades are, doesn't matter what your income level is, you get a $2,000 grant to go study in Turkey for 1 semester. Okay? You want a trip over there for 1 semester, you fill out the application, and you get it. Okay? You get to go over it. Okay, so And they're doing this not just at the, like I said, they're doing this not just at the federal level, but I'll bet dollars to donuts. You have 10 Gulen schools in your state here. They are doing this in every state across the country, okay? In fact, oddly enough, and maybe it's because of the number of people that live there, how few people live there, the greatest percentage of legislatures, state legislatures, to go to Turkey versus how many there are was in Idaho. Now, Idaho, what does Idaho have to do with Turkey? How much business do they conduct with Turkey, right? Right? But it is an effort to just permeate every facet of our society so that we view them more favorably, right? So, here's another interesting statistic. So, now this is based on the 2000 census, right? We have 2.8 million people in this country who identify themselves of Greek heritage. 300,000 Turks. So we literally are 10 times bigger than them. Okay? In terms of the number of folks that we have here that identify themselves either with Hellenism or with being Greek Orthodox. Right? And but the lobbying effort on the part of Turkey is unbelievable. There's an organization called ProPublica, and Turkey has more contacts with members of Congress than any other foreign government. They are at it, it's constant and it's vigilant. All right, now back to Gulen. So Time Magazine names him one of the 100 most influential people. Now, two things that I think help clarify some of the items in the 60 Minutes piece. And there are some things in there that are not completely accurate, right? And two things that are unassailable. And let me say, by the way, because I've been giving this talk a few times now, and you know, these conspiracy theorists, I used to make fun of them, and now I've become one. Right? And I'll just tell you, I'm left of center, right? So I'm not some, you know, ultra right-wing person here, right? But two things that are undeniable about our country. Number one, there was a study done about 10 years ago, and they interviewed journalists in the United States. And I'm talking about journalists now, people who actually make a living working for newspapers or some kind of a media outlet. I'm not talking about bloggers now, but full-time journalists. Almost 75% of them are atheists. All right? I mean, God is not an important part of what they do. And I don't think it's that being a journalist makes you an atheist. I think it's the other way around. I just think people that don't really have God in their life and are kind of cynical, they get and are kind of suspicious of everyone, they become journalists. Right? So we have that. And the second thing that we have going on in our country is that we are super thirsty, like a dry sponge in the middle of the Sahara for a moderate Muslim. Right? So right after 9/11, what does the president say? That Islam is a religion of peace. Right? And that these extremists that Father was talking about are outliers. And frankly, I have to tell you, I think that what is going on with this Gulen movement, where they are bringing thousands of our children over to Turkey for these festivals where they're performing, some of these are religious songs, that is much more dangerous than the extremists. And the reason it's more dangerous is because the extremists, if you see a terrorist, you're going to run away, right? This guy is inviting, and you actually want to go towards him because he says all the right things, he's very patient, very careful. They do not teach Islam in the schools. I mean, let me be clear about that. They do not teach Islam in the schools. But when you participate in the Turkish Olympics, which you are very much encouraged to do, and you learn Turkish, and you go over there, and you hear this imam address the audience almost like a Baptist revival, it's hard not to be sympathetic with them. And so when you start having tens of thousands of children growing up being sympathetic to this, then it makes it that much easier to get concessions at the highest levels in terms of advancing Islamic causes. Okay? And that's just a fact. I mean, that is what he tried to do overtly in Central Asia, and he failed. And he's now doing it covertly here in the United States. And it's much more dangerous here because we are paying for it. We are paying for it with our tax dollars. When you write your property tax bill at the end of the year, okay, you know, maybe you should write a little verse out of the Quran on it or something, because we are paying for this guy to open up these charter schools. You have 5 years ago or 6 years ago there were none in Florida. There's now 10. You've got 2 more coming, right? We had 1 in Texas 10 years ago. We now have 45. Right? And let me tell you, these schools, their test scores off the charts, man, off the charts. It is. They take these inner city kids, and their test scores just lock it up. They lock it up. Now, there is some controversy about whether they manipulate some of these, but for the most part, I will tell you, okay, they change the trajectory of the lives of many inner city kids, right? And the benefit that they get is they expose these. I mean, if you walk into these schools, the one thing you notice 2 things. Number one, the principal is always a Turkish man. Okay? Now, if you look at the statistics nationally about what the percentage of principals are in our public schools, you would expect, what would you guess the numbers? 50-50, right? That's pretty close to what it is nationally. In the Gulen schools, 98% of the principals are Turkish men. And it's the principal who dictates the policy of the school, right? And these are not Turkish American men. These are Turkish men who are here on these visas. Okay, so the other thing that you notice, I said there's 2 things. The other things that you notice is that the design inside and the kind of architecture inside, you kind of feel like you're in an Ottoman structure. And it has all these kind of elements of Islam. And now look, again, I want to be clear, there's no forced indoctrination to Islam, because if there was, they'd get shut down right away, just like what happened in Central Asia. They are much more cautious. And the central tenet, the most important thing about this Gulen movement, number 1, is secrecy. Secrecy, right? He does not do interviews. He encourages his followers to not talk. In fact, the ability to hold a secret is one of their highest virtues, according to his version of Islam. And let's remember, Islam, unlike Christianity, Islam is both a religion and a law. So when you hear about Sharia law, you hear about that? That and Islam and the Quran are the same thing. The Islam is like the set of rules and regulations about how you ought to live. And so in the Quran, it is true that a woman counts for half of a man. So you cannot convict a man under Sharia law unless 2 women testify against him. Now, there's a good Bill Cosby joke in there somewhere. Okay, but the Gulen schools are no different. They always make sure that there is a Turkish man running the school, because they need to keep control. And what happens is, I don't know if you saw some of the salaries, but there are these pockets of complaints all over the country. In every one of these schools, when they hire American teachers, which they need to do because they need to put their smiling faces up on the website and in these investigative pieces, because they are the spokesman for the school. But all these complaints have arisen that there's a pay disparity between what they pay these people here on the visas and what they pay their American counterparts. Now, part of that, I believe, is because they kick back at least 10%. I mean, this lady said 40%. But the most common thing is 10% goes back to the Gulen movement. Okay? So the Gulen movement today controls banks. The largest newspaper, I saw on the computer here, one of the Turkish newspapers that we always get that also publishes in English. That's owned by the Gulen movement. They own insurance companies. Gulen is estimated is worth today $25 billion. Okay? That is the net worth of his empire. And on the charter schools in the United States today, with how many there are, at the school board level, coast to coast, we are spending $400 million a year of taxpayer money for these schools. Now, if you kick back 10%, because again, the school boards don't care, as long as you meet the budget, and you build a school, and you buy the textbooks, and they take the standardized tests, they're not going to micromanage you like they do in public school. They don't really care about how you slice it and dice it. If you kick back 10%, that's $40 million a year that is going back to advance the Gulen movement. $40 million a year, tax-free on that. Yeah, actually, the number in 2015, the number of schools in the U.S. is going to be 158. 158. There's over 1,000 all over the world. All right. This is interesting. So the Gulen movement actually started in Smyrna, which you want to talk about murdering innocents and murdering, women and children that we just saw on this trash that they put out, is where one of the great massacres happened at the turn of the last century. All right. So yeah, so it is estimated that he has somewhere between 4 and 6 million followers today that follow his tenets. And look, in the grand scheme of things, the guy is a moderate Muslim. But he's still a Muslim. And he still follows Sharia law, right? And this is a guy that was a forceful advocate of women wearing headscarves in Turkey. Now he is in a major battle right now with Erdogan, who is the prime minister of Turkey. There was a major scandal a couple of years ago involving Erdogan, involving kickbacks and all that, and the allegations were that Gulen is the one that orchestrated that. And I don't know if they have fallen out or what, but he's now been re-indicted again. Now before that, if you were critical of Gulen in Turkey, this is the man of peace that we were just talking about, if you were critical of him, you got arrested. There was actually a prize-winning investigative journalist that had written this big expose about kind of the grand plans of the Gulen movement and what they intended to do, which is, he has said it that, he thinks the greatest period in history was the Ottoman Empire. And he's attempting to basically rebuild the Ottoman Empire. And this guy wrote this long expose, and as soon as the book came out, he gets jailed. He gets jailed for writing this investigative piece. And there were two other journalists the same thing happened to. And so in Turkey, you cannot get anybody to speak out against this guy. And the only place that's happening is in pockets, here and there in the United States. Yeah, this is when he applied for the green card. This is what Homeland Security gave as the basis for denying it, which was then overturned. The record contains overwhelming evidence that he is the leader of a large religious political movement with immense commercial holdings. Now, the interesting thing is, if you go to, in fact, I'm going to challenge you if you've got the nerve to do it. Call one of the Gulen schools, and I've got the list here in Florida. Okay, it's a local call. Call them and ask them if you are a Gulen school. They all deny it. They say they're inspired by him, but the Gulen movement has no control over the school. And the way that they're able to answer that without, breaking a sweat is they set up all of these, and it's not a pyramid, it's just kind of a loose association. They set up all these foundations where one is not linked to the other one. Right, so you have the one in Texas. they're the one that sponsors all these trips for these kids to go to Turkey on the Turkish Olympics. And Gulen's name appears nowhere in their organization. And he is able to control without being linked to anything. But they will deny that they have an affiliation to the Gulen movement, which is absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. All right, so, and he's a very prolific writer, Gulen is. Some of his early books include this book called Pearls of Wisdom, which is essentially kind of a manuscript for the world about how everyone can live under Islam, right? And all get along and have tolerance for one another, but it's under Islam. So he gets this, he got his green card, by the way, in 2008, so after it had been denied. All right. Yeah, so in one of his speeches, he says, Gulen said that his goal is for Turkey to be a global power again, like the Ottoman period. So here's another quote from him. This was in the Washington Post. Through education, we can teach tens of thousands of people the Turkish culture and win them over. That is what the Gulen movement is striving for. The Turkish foreign minister was quoted as saying that the schools abroad are playing an important representative role. The Turkish government will do everything to support them. These schools are important institutions as they help spread the Turkish culture abroad. All right, so if they get to their goal of 600 schools, right, that means they will have 120,000 kids at any one time enrolled in these schools who will be eligible for trips to Turkey, pick up some Turkish along the way. The other thing that these schools do, and it sounds incredibly benevolent at first, and our family actually knows a family where their child goes to one of these Gulen schools, and I'll tell you, this kid's life has turned around. I mean, he was a very poor student. He's rocketing north right now. But one of the reasons is because the principal actually came to the kid's house because he missed a couple of days of school, right? And so, you know, we hear all this criticism here about some teachers in public schools that the teachers don't really care. You know, they're just kind of watching the clock. And here you have these, you know, quote-unquote dedicated administrators and teachers in the schools actually going to children's homes to visit them, to encourage them to study and do homework. Now, interestingly enough, when a couple of the Central Asian countries shut down the Gulen schools there, and the principals were doing the same thing, they found that the reason that they were going to people's homes, so they could kind of look around and kind of see who was eligible for conversion. They would sit there and kind of talk to the parents, you know, befriend them. I mean, it was proselytizing without being right in your face about it, okay? It's like when the people show up at your door with the watchtower, you know, with the little tie, okay? And they start trying to tell you about the, you know, all these cults that, you know, that show up at your door. Except here, they're actually walking into the home. Now, again, there was no proselytizing with this child, but they are looking around. And no church, the local school boards don't really complain about them because the test results are good, it's cheaper, and it's focusing on low-income kids. So it's, you know, from their standpoint, it's a win-win. And they're not really concerned about the 50 schools in Texas, you know, the local school board in Broward County, Florida. We're only concerned with that, and we're only going to focus on our kids. And there's only one of these schools here, or two of these schools, and that's all I'm going to care about. And, you know, I don't really care what's happening in the rest of the country. And that's unfortunately the mentality that it's just by design. That's the way most school boards are going to operate. They have very tight budgets, and they're going to focus on what's in front of them right then and there. Okay, so yeah, it was Uzbekistan that closed all the Gulen schools. In fact, they arrested a number of the organizers of the schools for trying to subvert the authorities in that country. Okay, let me see here, and then I'll kind of dovetail this into how this relates to us, the Greek Orthodox. Yeah, like I said before, there's the other thing, interesting thing about these schools is there is, in most school boards, there's no requirement for competitive bidding. So they award these contracts, these construction contracts to whoever they want, and they go to Turkish companies. And most of them have like Greek names, like Atlas Construction. You know, it's. Oh, here's another scary thing. So in Texas, they have infiltrated Texas so heavily, and they've been so successful that one of the ways that they can raise money is through bonds. Okay, and so you can have private bonds or public bonds. So the private bonds are, you put on a bond offering, people buy the bonds, and then whether it's guaranteed or not is really a function of what some credit agency says whether your bond is creditworthy. Well, there's now a bill in the Texas House to have these charter schools to have their bonds backed by the state, right? So, I mean, it's probably going to sail through, and the way it's going to sail through is because they're going to put up the test results of how these schools are performing. As far as I know, that's the only state right now that is progressing along those lines, but I'm sure that that's coming in a lot of the other states as well. Yeah, in 2009, I know my mic is off. I'll speak up. So in 2009, there were almost 700 visas given to the Gulen schools and their teachers. Okay. And there has, in the history of our country, and I mean this country, there has never been a period of time where so many of our schools are being run by a foreign state, right? That's just never happened before. I mean, maybe I guess before the War of Independence, British schools, I guess. But other than that, this is really an alarming trend. Because if they can get 5% of these kids, 10% of these kids to grow up with a comforting ear toward what it means to be Muslim, they've accomplished a lot. I mean, look at the full court press and the change in attitude in our country towards gay marriage, right? Today, 10 years ago, it was an embarrassment to say that you were for gay marriage, right? And today, we're almost at a point now where it's an embarrassment to say that you're against it, right? And part of that is because of the constant onslaught from the media, the constant onslaught telling us this. This is much more powerful because we're getting kids from the age of 5 or 6 years old to be very sympathetic to Turkish causes. So, when we have 2,500 Greeks, and that's how many we have in Constantinople today, and our ecumenical patriarch is literally dying on the vine because they passed laws that it's illegal to fix up the structure where the patriarch is, right? Who is going to care about that? Who's going to care about that? If you've got members of the House and you've got members of society and everybody very sympathetic to Turkey, if they grow up thinking that Greeks committed genocide against the Turks, that Greeks under Ottoman rule were free to observe their faith, maintain their language and cultural identity. In other words, you had it good under us. What are you complaining about? You had it real good under us. And some of the stuff on this website is unbelievable. And the fact that congressmen would lend their name to this is absolutely shocking. I mean, the stuff they say about the Armenians is even worse. Is even worse. And take a second, and when you get back, take a second and go through it. All right, so here are some of the foundations, by the way. I told you they got benevolent names. These are the ones in Florida. The Coral Springs Foundation, the Atlantic Foundation, the Fellowship Isles Foundation, the Magnolia Foundation, the Nile Foundation, the Orlando Culture and Dialogue Center, the Sirius Foundation, the Tallahassee Tolerance and Dialogue Group, the Anatolia Cultural Center, and there's many, many, many more. I mean, we've got I think there are over 100 of these in Texas, and you have, I think, more than 20 in Florida that are just constantly popping up. And there aren't that many of them. I mean, there are not that many Turks in the United States. That's the interesting thing. Okay, so what do we do? That's really the big issue, right? What do we do about this? Well, when I ask that question, I always get back, really good responses about very ambitious things. And the reality is, if you make the task too ambitious, then you're going to fail, right? And it seems to me we need to do two things. And if we could do these two things, we would go a long way, because I don't care how many billions of dollars that they have, how many lobbyists they're going to buy. The one thing that we have that they do not is the truth. Okay? I mean, that is the thing that we can beat them down on 10 times out of 10. But the only way that the truth matters is people need to know about it. So the number one thing that we have to do, the most important thing that we have to do, is we have to start telling people about this, right? And we need to spend a little bit of time learning a little bit more about it. I could speak on this, and normally this thing can go for a couple of hours, because the cross relationship between all these foundations is staggering. It is just staggering how, it looks like a spider web almost, in terms of how forceful they are and how much they're trying to penetrate us here in the United States. But you need to tell your neighbors. And more importantly, you need to tell other Greek Orthodox people. Okay, so when you hear things like, who cares about the patriarchate, I just care about my parish. We need to stand together. We are one church, right? When we recite the Trinity, it's, I believe, in one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And we all need to stay together and speak out against this. I will tell you that there are pockets of school boards across the country that have shut down some of these schools. Okay? Now, the problem is they're growing faster than they're closing. So their numbers are ever expanding. But here's the second thing that we need to do. Okay? And look, I'm not a member of your parish. You have a very delightful parish. But we absolutely need to give more to our churches. Okay? Each of us. we need if you're pledging $500 or $600 a year, man, that is just not going to cut it. That is not going to cut it. There's no way that we can have the resources to have the programs to steep our kids in the faith and to steep our kids in the truth if the church is wondering whether we're going to keep our lights on. Right? The one thing about these Gulenists, when they come over here, okay, whether they do it willingly or reluctantly, man, they give back. They give back at least 10% of their income for the greater cause. Okay? And these are Muslims that we're talking about. And we're still putting $1 in the tray. Right? And I truly believe that that's the answer. Number one, talk to other Greek Orthodox. And number two, we all at every parish, we all need to bump up how much we give. Because the more robust the church is, and the more robust and the more priests we can have, the more programs we can have, right? Your kids are not going to get sucked into that if that happens. But if we're operating on a shoestring, we're going to lose this. We really are. And we have just ourselves to blame. So anyway, I'll open it up for questions. Like I said, I could go for a while on this.
Short questions and short answers if we can, so we can entertain.
Yeah.
Lady over there.
I was going to a lecture at the Lutheran Church on Long Island last week, and the lady that was there was from Pakistan. She was a Lutheran. She converted to various others. She made sixth Islamic centers already. They're very, very powerful. And the other thing that she said, Dearborn, Michigan is Islamic. And she says the next city that's going to be like that is Orlando, Florida. Okay? My question to you is, you said that these schools, the Harmony schools,
Well, that's what they're called. That's what they're called in Texas.
okay,
In
but
Florida,
you said they don't say they're connected. But then how do you find that in the documents, in the legal papers?
so the way that you find that is these children are invited to go to Turkey. They wear Turkish garb. Okay? They get on stage. In fact, I can pull up some of the YouTubes. Okay? You see like black kids, right, from the inner city singing Turkish songs that have religious connotations. It is not part of the curriculum. But the after-school programs and what they call these Turkish Olympics, you get to go to a foreign country, you get to fly in an airplane, you get to stay in a hotel, right? And yet your family can barely afford to put food on the table. Man, I'm taking that 10 times out of 10. But if you're a 14-year-old kid, so that's how they do it. That's how they do it. Yes, sir.
I think you said that some school boards have closed some of these schools.
Yes.
How do they do it?
Okay, so
And why?
yeah, there's not one defining reason. Each one is different. Some of them have closed because there are very powerful unions in that city, and these teachers are all non-union. Okay? The school board just did not want to take the heat from the union over it. That's one reason. Another reason is that they found that in some of these schools, the teachers were not qualified. You have people teaching English that can barely speak English, right? In other instances, there was so much kind of community uproar about this, because once you get a license to operate a charter school, it's not indefinite. It is for a term, and you have to then renew. Okay, it's kind of like a driver's license. You get a driver's license for 5 years, and then you have to requalify again after 5 years. And so when they come up again the next time, they did not renew them. So it's really kind of all over the board, but these are very isolated, right?
One of the points you make is a very good one. You've got to communicate what's going on. It won't be very powerful. You have communication. It could be on YouTube, it could be a PowerPoint presentation, it could be people who could then send it on to other people. I mean, for me, capture all the content is very difficult. If you gave me a primer, it would be easy.
So there are two people that go all over the country speaking on this. And they're both actually former teachers at the Gulen schools. And man, they are manic about it. And if you want, I'll give you the website. But they've done these webinars on the Gulen movement. The total webinars are 3.5 hours, to give you an idea. Okay? It is, and I'll tell you, by the end of that, Sophie Tokatov, you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, wow, man, this is really terrifying. And they've connected everything in terms of these different foundations and organizations. So the point is, it's already up there, and it's already available. The problem is, number one, they're buying the influence, right, with these trips. And number two, school boards don't care. All they care about is meeting the budget, being able to go back to the voters and say, kids in our district, their test scores increased by 10%, and we've taken so many kids out of poverty, and now, the X percent of kids in this socioeconomic scale have now enrolled in college. That's how you get reelected, right? And that's, unfortunately, Gulen has figured out that he's taking advantage of that. Their agenda and his agenda are totally different.
Yes, over there.
So what you're saying, you're giving us all this information, but what is going to be done? Is there anything to be done to stop the movement? And what happens if he should pass away? Is there a whole organization with all that money that continues on with it?
Yeah,
Is there anything we can do, or we just go home and worry every night?
Okay, so the question is, whether he has a succession plan and whether there's anything we can do to stop the movement. I am here to talk to you because I have 4 children, right? Hopefully someday they're going to have children, and I want them to stay in the church. And the people that are going to be the most receptive to this, by far, are people that were victimized by the Turks. Us, right? Our papus and our yayas, and people that are from Asia Minor. I mean, this resonates because, when we hear this, we hear our grandparents talking to us about what they went through. Somebody that, Tim Delson, who grew up, in Central Florida, they don't care. They're just not going to care. And so, I guess what I'm telling you is I'm concerned about the Orthodox kids and our Orthodox community and making sure that we know and then taking steps where we can to stop them. And frankly, we have been very successful in many respects. I mean, Turkey, just as an example, so the State Department has a kind of a human rights rating list. And there is and the worst category is, on the Human Rights Watch, is countries of exceptional concern. And there were only like 6 countries on that list. Turkey was one of them for human rights violations. 2 years ago, they were removed. They didn't just move up to the next level. They were removed from all the lists altogether. And a number of folks associated with the archons mostly just raised holy heck about that. And they met with people from the State Department and all that, and got them back on the list. Now, it wasn't in the worst category, it was one up. But it is a constant struggle. This is not something like, I'm going to write one letter, got it off my chest, good. It is a constant struggle, right? Constant struggle.
I'll take 2 more questions, and then we're done. John.
I'm not sure whether you're aware or not, but in higher education, the Turkish government has funded and endowed at least 20 chairs at universities, from Yale to the University of California. They're doing exactly the same thing for the higher education government.
That's right. He said that Turkey has funded endowed chairs in many universities. There's at least 20. That's exactly right.
I've been in education for 30 years in New York City, and we're having a terrible time with our charter schools, and there are Muslim schools over there too. First of all, their scores are high and graduating because 54% of the students drop out. They don't want the special ed kids. They get on top of the parents and they have those kids removed. Right away, you have our higher scoring students.
That's true. In fact, that was the basis for some of the closures, is that they were discriminating against special ed kids.
Right. So we're having a very difficult time, and it's unfortunate that the parents are not informed enough about what's going on. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but certainly I don't understand. Well, I guess I do understand why the local governments go ahead and give these schools permission to open the charter schools. But that shouldn't be. What are the guidelines? What's going to happen to the future of our students, as we said, when we have these charter schools? They have no science program. I saw a science lab. The ones that I've seen don't have any science lab. This is for profit, they said. We can't afford. We're not going to put a science lab. That was probably that movie was made just for the United States to see how well we're doing. But we really have a very big problem on our hands, and we should go after our politicians to end this.
Last question, Dr. Blasi.
Did anybody try other channels except the 60 Minutes program, like Fox Channel with the variety program?
sorry, I
give you this. O'Reilly program. What about it?
Oh, I don't know. Possible. There is, I will tell you, if you go home and Google Gulen schools, you'll get thousands of hits. Most of them very critical, very, very critical.
Okay.
Yes, so there is no doubt that, well, in the public schools, they're very careful here in the U.S., okay? Very, very careful. But when the girls participate in these Turkish Olympics, okay, the costume includes the headdress. And most importantly, at the management levels, I mean on the board level of these schools, they're almost all men. The principals are all men. There is, look, it's just, this is not a controversial issue. It is a fact that in the Quran, a woman's word is worth half a man's. That's just a fact. That's what it says. All right? So, and this guy's an imam. Okay? All right? It would be like one of our priests saying that the Trinity is not real. I mean, you can't do that. If you're a priest, you accept the doctrine that we have. Same with him.
I think I'm going to have to stop. I think we're moving. The time has passed, and I want to do two things. One is we have to thank again John Zavitsanos. And before we leave, there's a couple of awards that we want to.
Right, I'd like to invite, if you don't mind, the co-chairs of the Christian Rights and Freedom Steering Committee, so Mr. Dimas, Richard Kappas, if you could also please come up. And if you could also invite Dr. Clemens, as the chair of the Christian Relief, to please come forward. We have several things that we'd like to share with you, John. We'd certainly like to present to you as a token of our appreciation something that we hope that will help you to remember us, because we don't want this to be a once and done. We really do hope that we'll be able to continue this relationship and you'll be back. And so we have an award here that says an appreciation of your support for our Christian rights and freedom movement and for enlightening our community, Mr. John Zavitsanos, Esquire, the 23rd of January 2015, St. Catherine's Orthodox Church. Please come forward and just hold that. And then finally, of course, we want you to remember that it is St. Catherine who loves you here in Naples. And so we have the beautiful icon of St. Catherine. And on the back it says here, John, greetings in Christ. We are indeed very grateful, and we thank you for taking the time to be with us at St. Catherine and to address us on the most timely issue of Islamic influence in the U.S. charter schools. May your inspired words energize us to uplift Christ, witnessing for our faith in the face of radical extremism. And may our Lord Jesus Christ richly bless you for your love. Always with love from our church.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind everybody of the next event that we invite you all to come. This is on March 14th. It's Saturday, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. In this church hall, we have a symposium on religious freedom, where the National Commander of the Archons, Dr. Anthony Limberakis, will be the keynote speaker, and Father Fuad Saba, the Dean of the St. George Antiochian Church in Coral Gables, Florida. He will be speaking as well. Please save the date with you before you leave out. Mark it in your calendars. We'd like to see this and twice as many people. We hope to fill this hall for that day. So.
If you haven't left your email with us in the table there, please do so we can contact you with further information regarding all of our events. We'll send you emails on that and keep you abreast. Thank you very, very much for coming on behalf of the committee and Christian Rights and Freedom Committee. We appreciate it. Thank you.